Hey guys, welcome back to another video by me, Shubran Jambal. So today's video is going to be about forced induction. This is the first part in a two-part series. So I'm going to cover turbochargers today, how they work, the different types of turbos, the pros and cons, the basic stuff. Anyways, moving on right into the video. So first of all, I'll tell you what forced induction is. So forced induction is basically a simple and easy way to increase the power output of the engine in your vehicle. There are many engines without forced inductions, and these engines are known as NA engines or naturally aspirated engines. Most of the time, cars with forced induction make more power than their NA counterparts, and NA means that there is like no assistance at all from any turbochargers or superchargers. Hence, all the power produced is natural, which is in the name naturally aspirated. There are many naturally aspirated cars, although they're dying a slow death because of modern emission standards, and to decrease emissions without sacrificing power, manufacturers have started looking at forced induction as a way to increase power and decrease emissions. The Lamborghini Aventador, the C8 Corvette, and the Ferrari 812 Superfast. Headphone warning: if you're wearing headphones, please turn on your volume, you will regret this a lot. Car that you just heard was the Lamborghini Aventador, and it might be the last naturally aspirated V12 from Lamborghini ever. Anyways, after using forced induction and experiencing its benefits, manufacturers started downsizing. Downsizing is just what it sounds like. It is making the engines smaller but adding forced induction to it so that they can outperform any cars with high displacement or their NA counterparts. So now onto turbochargers. How a turbo works. So a turbo has two main components. Both of them have turbines inside them. One of the fan is for the exhaust and one is for the intake, and both lie in separate housings. The fan for the exhaust is a turbine and the fan for an intake is a compressor. These are directly connected, so when the turbine spins, the compressor does too, and they spin when air is sucked into it, which drives the turbine, which in turn drives the compressor, which in turn goes to the engine and produces power. So in basic language, a turbocharger is like a big vacuum which is powered by your exhaust gases. So the exhaust gases spin the turbine, which I talked about earlier, and this turbine has a rod connected to another turbine which sucks in air from the outside and pushes it right back into the engine. And now there is more air in the engine, and the engine requires more fuel as well. So a turbo gives power, but it consumes more fuel than usual, and that is a con of the turbo, that it lowers fuel efficiency, but so is the case with superchargers. And if you didn't understand what I just said, you can just rewind the video a little bit and you can hear it again and again till you get it. Moving on to some pros and cons of turbochargers. Some pros. First, they're very good in producing power, and they produce more power than comparable superchargers, and this is because a turbo just uses the exhaust gases to power itself rather than a supercharger that is mechanically driven. And second, they are cheaper than superchargers and produce more power for your money. Now on to the cons. Most of the time, turbochargers aren't that reliable compared to NA cars, and well, NA cars are more reliable, but this was true in older times. Now with better technology in turbochargers, they are almost as reliable as NA engines, and if you're going for an older car with turbos, be careful, they might fail. Now the most important and the worst part about turbochargers: turbo lag. Now, unlike NA engines, turbochargers don't give you instant power. Instead, they take up some time to spool up, and this gap in between pressing the accelerator and getting power is known as turbo lag. Now, to overcome this issue, engineers came up with an amazing solution. To eliminate the spool up time, instead of putting in one big turbo, they decided to put in two smaller turbos which work at different RPMs and reduce turbo lag by a lot. This setup which I told you about is known as a bi-turbo or a twin turbo system. So anyways, continuing with what I said before, a twin turbo setup uses two smaller turbochargers which in unison produce the same amount of power as one huge turbo, but with way lesser turbo lag. One car that has bi-turbos is the AMG GT-S, and I made a video on it, but it had to get removed. I don't think I'm allowed to talk about that. Anyways, moving on, BBT, please don't give me a cease and desist. There are two types of bi-turbo engines, and they are parallel bi-turbo engines and sequential bi-turbo engines. The parallel twin turbo system is the more common one and is the one that most people think of when they hear twin turbo setup. And in this setup, there are two identical size turbos for all that boost. In sequential twin turbo setups, there are two turbos in the engine which differ in size. That is, one turbo can be bigger than the other turbo and operate at different speeds. The main function of the sequential turbocharger setup is to reduce turbo lag, and that's the reason the turbos are not the same size in this setup. This setup uses the smaller turbos at lower RPMs till the time the larger turbo spools up and gives you more boost. Sequential turbos are the most efficient twin turbo setup as they minimize the turbo lag by a lot. To summarize turbos, here's what I say. Turbocharged engines can deliver better fuel efficiency than naturally aspirated engines, but that is only if you know how to drive a turbocharged car properly. But they can be pretty unreliable if you don't know how to use them properly, and that could be a big turn off for many people who are thinking of turbos for more power. So yes, in theory turbos might sound like an amazing package, but every rose has its thorns. Turbos are a great way to get power, and they will always be used extensively on performance cars. After all, they recycle exhaust gases to produce power, and that's a great way of producing power. That's it for part 1 of forced induction. And I could have just made one super long video about the topic, but my viewer retention in my previous videos is pretty bad, and if I made a 20-minute long video about it, it would be super bad. So I decided to divide it into 2 parts. So stay tuned for the next part about superchargers, and that's all for today. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Hit that notification bell to get notified as soon as I post, and in the meantime listen to this amazing Lamborghini Huracan V10 twin turbo. Have a good one and peace.